There is one shape that has enchanted humanity for eons, cut from bedrock, etched into mountaintops, and still buried beneath jungles. The pyramid. From Giza to Mexico, Cambodia to the Balkans, always the same form, built not just for reverence, but utility, something we can still use. Across the world, researchers, engineers, and now even gardeners are unlocking these secrets, from charging seeds, stones, and water, with remarkable results, to the preservation of food without decay, and even landscape harmonization. For electroculture enthusiasts, this matters because if geometry can shape the invisible, then pyramids can be used for the benefit of life. In this series, we'll trace the global blueprint of pyramid structures, proportion, resonance, alignment, and polarity to uncover secrets poised to revolutionize not just how we grow food, but how we understand energy, consciousness, and the landscape itself. Are you ready to activate a forgotten technology? Then come with me. Hi there, Rayleigh Bacon here, and welcome to the Electroculture Foundation series, where we explore the unseen forces behind plant growth, magnetism, light, atmospheric charge, the hidden harmonics of our living Earth, and of course, the untold stories, the rebels, the researchers, the mystics, and the forgotten science. Coming up on Season 2, Episode 3, we've got the Sacred Steward who yielded 80 potatoes from one plant, the light-beaming Pyramid of Chichen Itza, and the enchanted technology poised to revolutionize seed epigenetics. This is Pyramid Power meets Electroculture. I have always been fascinated by pyramids as long as I can remember. Oh, that rooster is rather noisy in the background. I better put him under a pyramid. I have found that pyramids with seeds have an immediate response. This is the thing that can really, eliminate the eye rolling of naysayers. Hopefully after this episode, even you listening who has doubts towards the efficacy of using pyramids to influence life, well, maybe that will change. Maybe you'll make your first pyramid. Maybe you'll buy one and start tinkering with seeds, because once you see the effect, I guarantee you it's not just going to change the way you grow food, it could change the way you relate to the world around you. Here's the thing. Someone once asked me recently, why do you work with electroculture? Poor about that rooster, he just won't shut up. They're literally just they're hanging out right outside my studio. There's about 6 of them. They're sitting on top of a banister on my staircase, and they're just pooping on the side. That's so annoying. Oh, I haven't had time to fix the electric fencing. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. Just be quiet. Oh dear, where was I? So, pyramids. This is the most beautiful thing about pyramids, is the quickness in which you can see results. There are some pretty radical claims from the infamous Golod, who made fiberglass pyramids throughout Russia and the Ukraine. His largest, I believe, was 44 meters. It's now destroyed. And he made claims about water under these structures not freezing, even well below zero. I think it was like multiple degrees below zero. I don't know whether that's true. Even for me, that's still a dubious account. But I have seen that it does influence life. And this is the part that I find fascinating, is there's a fellow Canadian. This is going to get you really excited before we go into the deep dive. Fellow Canadian Charles Hubbard from Nova Scotia. He was a biodynamic farmer. He made a pyramid greenhouse. It's not as big as Les Brown's pyramid greenhouse, another Canadian from the 70s. But Charles Hubbard's pyramid was basically a wooden structure with copper etched around the siding. It's tubes of copper, and the wood material, they just won't be quiet, were designed to hold it intact. And what he did was he planted potatoes around the perimeter of this structure. In the corners of the pyramid, his potatoes, instead of harvesting, maybe 6 to a dozen potatoes, which is a good harvest for potatoes off one plant, really good in fact, he was getting upwards of 80 potatoes from the plants in the corner of the pyramids. 80 potatoes. He's got a YouTube channel. It's still up and running. I'll stick it in the show notes. If I'm not mistaken, I watched him in a video harvest these potatoes, and, well, it is remarkable. Absolutely remarkable. What the heck is going on out there? I guess I'm going to have to pause. I've got some workers that have arrived and just don't get a break with this recording. We'll go right into the regular structure of today's episode without any more pre-ramble and rooster. In 1859, sand stretched to the horizon, stone blocks shimmered beneath the Egyptian sun, and atop the great pyramid of Khufu stood a man with a question. Sir William Siemens. He was an engineer, an inventor, a rationalist. The summit was broken and uneven, but the air, that air, it was different. Dry, of course, but more than that, it had a charge to it. He reached out, just a hand at first, testing, feeling, then his whole arm raised toward the empty sky. And that's when it started. First, it was a tingling, not heat, not pressure, something else, like a vibration in the very air itself. One of his guides stepped back. He was uneasy. He pointed upward and muttered something Siemens would never forget. The mountain hums. They were inside a field, invisible, electric, alive. Siemens being Siemens. He didn't flinch. He improvised. He took out a wine bottle, wrapped it in damp newspaper, a crude Leyden jar, a primitive capacitor. He lifted it and he waited. And then a crackling occurred. Sparks licked the bottle's rim. A pale corona bloomed at the top, soft light dancing silently in the dusk. He was capturing energy, ambient, real, unexplained. But not everyone saw it that way. One of the guides panicked, shouting, rushing toward him. To Siemens, this was science. To the man, it was sorcery, or worse. Instinctively, Siemens turned, and with the bottle still charged, raised it like a shield. A snap, a flash, a thin arc of energy leapt from the glass, straight to his flesh. The man dropped, stunned, unharmed, but awestruck. What had happened there was still something that many of us still don't fully understand, because over 150 years later, that same strange field, that same apex phenomenon, it's, being measured again, not just in Egypt, as we will discover, also from Bosnia to Russia to Mexico. 3 places, 3 different pyramids that behave like transmitters. And the deeper you go, the more it begins to look less like a coincidence and more like a forgotten science, waiting to be remembered. I first came across the story of Sir William Siemens from a work of Christopher Dunn. I believe it was the Giza power plant, where he went into some of the alternative theories of electrical generation and harvesting of energy. It stood out because the honest truth is, and maybe you can relate to it, it's that when people first hear about pyramids, the first thing that comes to mind is always Egypt. It's straight to the Giza Plateau. But it's worth noting that Egypt is just one chapter of a much larger story, because there are pyramids that stretch across the entire world. And you listening to this, well, you might be well versed in pyramidology. You might have an understanding of some of the history, some of the alternative science worldviews, etc. Maybe even some of the technology implications that we can use for electroculture. I want to say, before going in deep into this topic, there are going to be some points here that might be familiar to you. Just skip over that if you must, or tune out for a bit. But I'm hopeful that I do a broad scope here, do this topic justice, and hopefully you glean something of value. So that's my intention. Let that be known. So pyramids, they're not even just in Africa. Although there are pyramids in the Sudan, the Nubian pyramids are well noteworthy. There are even pyramids in Nigeria. But across continents, across oceans, diverse languages, periods of civilization, pyramids are found almost everywhere. In fact, 80 to 90% of the pyramids presently are located near or within forested or even previously fertile areas. Now, I think this has to do with some energetic or geomantic factors, which we will cover. Their placement, they often intersect what many refer to as ley lines, as well as water crossings, telluric currents. We spoke about that in season 1, electrical currents under the earth that typically move east-west, but also they're oriented usually with magnetic north, which means they're not just tapping in with funneled telluric currents, they're tapping in with magnetic flux as well. So these are areas of high natural resonance, areas that are often referred to as conductivity discontinuity points. That's a mouthful, huh? What that means is when you have a geological feature in a landscape that disrupts the general geology of a given location, or a boundary between geological features, you get this disruption that results in a change in the way electrical current or magnetic flux moves subterraneally. And when that happens, it generates either upward discharges of energy, typically referred to as vortexes in colloquial terms. So that is very interesting because, as we'll discover, the geometry of the pyramids that we find that are the most efficacious for supporting life, the geometry matters. There are some incredible pyramids even in China. Some people refer to as burial mounds, but there are some large ones that the Chinese have actually censored. There are some satellite images and they do not look like mountains. And like all the pyramids that are denounced as being mountains, whether here in Italy or in Bosnia, they're always oriented very, very, very coincidentally with the Earth's magnetic field. Super interesting. In Indonesia, there are megalithic terraces like Gunung Padang that predate the pyramids of Egypt by thousands of years. There are even other obscure pyramids in Indonesia. I came across a book. I've mistaken the woman's name who wrote it. I read it many years ago. I think I'll touch on that and open that up in a future segment because she spoke about this influence when she went there. It was considered, because much of Indonesia is Muslim presently, they refer to these places as being dangerous. They're places where you do not go. Much like the story of Siemens and the Arabic assistant that panicked and thought it was the jinn, right? Spirits that are unhinged and chaotic. This is, well, many would refer to this as superstition, but the strange thing was, in this woman's book, when she stood on top of this pyramid, it basically scrambled her brain. She said she had this incredible feeling of fear, anxiety, an oppressive force that was so significant that it gave her nightmares for years afterwards. She had PTSD, and the locals, they refused to go near it. They said that if you were to do so, it would curse you, and you would never be the same. And I don't think she was. She actually was going to write an additional book where she claimed she was going to uncover what this phenomena was. And then it went silent. I waited for that book for a while. And then when she put out a new edition of the book that I had read, in the final prelude of that, she stated something to the extent that she wouldn't write this new book. She said, and I think it's a cop-out, but she said it would be disrespectful to the indigenous people because it's not my story to tell. But what had happened here is something based on my research and the work of Halberg and Burke in their book, Stone of Plenty, Seed of Knowledge. I always get it mixed up. Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty. This is an ultimate deep dive book that you need to do if you're interested in electroculture. It answers a lot of questions regarding pyramids from a conventional viewpoint. And in that book, there was this particular account of an indigenous tribal mountain. And it's escaped me where it was and the name. I will reference, I'll do a whole episode on this book, maybe even two, because there's a lot there. But in this particular location, what they discovered was that anybody who happened to be hiking past this part of a cliff would spontaneously, a good percentage would spontaneously start crying. And women, many women would begin menstruating suddenly, even when it's not in sync with their cycle. And notably, people would begin to have nosebleeds as well. It was something that was not well understood until Burke brought his magnetometer. And quickly he realized that on the edge of this cliff was a sharp jutting point, a geological feature that contained a great deal of, it was either magnetite or hematite, an iron-based compound stone, and that was having a ferromagnetic effect. It was pumping magnetism and intensifying that out of the point, and it was disrupting the iron within blood. Very strange. And of course, causing people to cry, which shows you that the brain is intrinsically influenced by magnetic fields. What I believe likely is the case was this pyramid the woman is referencing contained a great deal of iron and would have been used likely to charge seeds, which we'll talk on in a later point. So there are still legends about pyramids in New Zealand, Australia. There are even people who claim that there are pyramids in Antarctica, and there are some people presently who are working to extract a pyramid that is claimed to be in Alaska. There are also, of course, the step pyramids in Mesoamerica. Pyramids and pyramidal structures are all over the world. There are some themes associated with them that are really important, meta patterns that emerge, which we'll speak on a bit later. And Europe, well, Europe isn't exempt from this either. The Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun in Visoko, this has stirred a lot of debate for decades. It is incredible. It's hotly contested, and we'll touch on that. In Italy, there are step pyramids in Montevecchia, which, oddly enough, they also align with the stars of Orion, and they take this formation that is very similar to the Giza Plateau, and apparently there are some of these structures in Greece and France as well. What I'm saying here is the pyramid shape has been used everywhere, and I think for right reason. We're going to break down some of the technology that they likely possessed. We're not going to go into concepts like, well, levitation of stone blocks or ideas of man-made geopolymers to make pyramids. There are all kinds of theories, some better than others. We're not even going to speak on the work here in Italy of Malanga, who has been at the forefront of this idea of there being these cylindrical structures beneath the Great Pyramid, one of the Great Pyramids of Giza. I don't really believe that presently. I think Malanga, he's a weird one. But I digress. The Pyramid of the Sun in Visoko, Bosnia, this one is quite interesting. There are massive subterranean tunnels that have been made by humans at some point, and flowing water that has been used to heal. Various people flock from around the world to help with this project, even now, I believe. And they've excavated entire areas, removing large blocks that are shaped stone. So this is something that is likely deliberate. And if indeed it is, to my knowledge, it's bigger than the pyramids of Giza. The ones in Bosnia, they don't align with magnetic north. They align with true north, which is very interesting. I think this is something of an indication that these particular pyramids predate some of the older pyramids, likely from a civilization before a massive upheaval. This is my view. I do believe that there are cyclical earth changes, and the precession of the equinox has been an indication of that cycle of time. Probably 12,000 year cycles to 24,000 year cycles. And it's my view, a bit of a tangent. I love tangents. I'm sorry for those of you who don't. The pyramids of Giza, I have this view that if they were built with such incredible precision, they likely had an influence, or maybe still do, on the Earth's magnetic field. And I think the true north alignment has more to do with harmonizing the Earth's geomagnetic field to minimize perturbations or disruptions in that field that can result in, well, civilization crushing Earth changes. Now, in Bosnia, those pyramids, the present researcher, I think Osmanovic is his name, he claimed that they emit some form of energy. Some claim to have measured it at 28 kilohertz, specific frequency bandwidth. And the strangest part about it is that it gets stronger the further it travels from the apex, which means it's not dissipating, it's compounding. This is why many have referred to it as a non-Hertzian form of energy, but scalar waves. For many, this sounds rather dubious. However, I came across an image once. This is before AI, and this was well documented. The pyramid of Kukulatan at Chichen Itza in Mexico. There was a photograph that caught, during an equinox, a beam of light that was being emitted from the top. If I find that, I'll stick it in the show notes. many people would say it was some kind of camera glitch. However, there's a book Mark Vidler wrote called The Star Mirror. I'll cover that in a future episode. All I'll say now is to not extend too far into the weeds, is that in that book, he documented very clearly the pyramids of Giza and the alignment that they had, not just with Orion's belt, but with each of the brightest stars of all 12 zodiac constellations, and the second brightest star in all such constellations, with very precise geometry mirrored between each constellation. We'll cover that in a future episode. Incredible stuff, implying that they were likely using pyramids for not just channeling this subterranean energy that I spoke of earlier, but cosmic energy as well, and being a nexus point, an intermediary between these two forces for the betterment of life. That is, well, that's this episode in a nutshell. Exactly. You don't have to listen anymore. You just have to know that it's the unification of all things. And in that central point, life seems to flourish. Everything else is just icing on the cake. This is very reminiscent of last week's episode, Season 2, Episode 2, of Egina and his magnetic monopole theory. It's very, very similar, this unification of polar forces emanating life and influencing matter. Yeah, I think that's likely what the pyramids were doing. But this is just the beginning, because this phenomena isn't just seen in Chichen Itza or in Bosnia. It was also documented by the famous Russian pyramid builder. He might have been Ukrainian. Now it's rather contentious to not be certain. His name was Alexander Golod. He was a mathematician and a director of a Moscow-based aerospace company. He constructed a 44-meter-high fiberglass pyramid on the outskirts of Moscow. Incredible. He was later commissioned to do other projects. I think he did almost 17 similar pyramids throughout Russia and parts of Eastern Europe. Many of these, they still stand to this day. However, they're on private land and are poorly accessible. The one that stood out, however, this large pyramid near Moscow, which unfortunately it later was blown down by this sudden storm that just happened out of nowhere. So many people are familiar with the Giza pyramids and their dimensions, at least visually. To give an indication, the Giza pyramids are roughly 42 degrees on their base angles, whereas the Golod pyramid was 76.345. It sounds abstract, but it is relevant, because that exact angle holds within it the Fibonacci sequence in terms of spherical geometry. Think of it this way. Imagine a pyramid structure that's much steeper than Giza. Hold that in your imagination. Now imagine that you have a sphere at the base of this structure. It doesn't go right to the top, because when it touches the side of the sloping angle, it gets restricted. Therefore, it needs to only cover a small portion of the pyramid. If you were to continue stacking spheres on top of each other, whereby each one is getting smaller and smaller until you reach the tip, what this does is the diameters of these spheres contained within the shape, in proportion to each other, make the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio. Now, if you're not familiar with the golden ratio, it's seen in all of living things. It's in the placement of stellar bodies in our solar system relative to each other. The same mathematics. It's in the dimensions of Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, a very important image of our own proportions, right? In that, when you have the spherical geometry on top of each other, it generates a torsion field. It's an alternative concept in physics that's creating a spiraling energy, a compression spiral. And according to people who follow the torsion field hypothesis, it seems to influence space and matter. Now, it has something to do with time compression, and it might be a reason why food, when left in pyramids, doesn't decompose as quickly. This is all just theoretical presently. There are many people who claim to have evidence as to the mathematics behind this alternative physics. It's beyond me. But just to give you an understanding that these things exist. So like the pyramid in Kukulkan, it's hard for me to pronounce, and the Bosnian pyramids, the Golod pyramid also created a torsion field that generated an energetic effect. It's pretty strange stuff for me. It was apparently demonstrated and measured by the Kharkiv Institute of Technology. It was a 1.6 kilometer influence on the atmosphere where the localized air became ionized. Or my view is more likely, because I think of ionization in terms of UVC radiation and above, and this isn't putting out a Hertzian field, so it shouldn't in theory be ionizing the air. What may be occurring instead is it is compressing space in that area through the torsion field generation and pulling ions from the surrounding air and funneling them into this compression effect that's coming out of the tip of the pyramid. And that would explain why in not just the Bosnian pyramid, but in this Golod pyramid, as you extended higher and higher, the effect wasn't radiating out or diminishing in the way that you would expect with Hertzian field resonance. Now, for me, this is unlikely to be a coincidence. I'm sharing these to show that there are measurable effects that pyramidal structures have on the environment. Not just on the atmosphere, but Golod's research claimed that there were effects on the surrounding geology as well. That salt that was placed inside the pyramid, when administered to prisons, reduced the rate of violence and depression within pyramids. It's weird stuff, implying that physical substances become imbued with some form of energy that emerges from the vacuum or the ether. When you look at it in isolation, it's hard to believe. But when you connect dots and start to look at the various examples of similar effects, as we'll document later, such as charging stones, paramagnetic basalt stones within a pyramid, and then broadcasting that on your land, you can see visual effects to the growth rates of plants. If you charge water, you can see visual effects to the growth rate of plants. That's something that you can do from the comfort of your home. So if you don't believe any of these stories, well, I encourage you to do your own research, because direct experience will tell you that when there's smoke, there's fire. But before we can get to looking at how practitioners around the world are actually applying these principles directly in gardens, farms, greenhouses, and the like, we still need to lay a greater foundation to this pyramid science, because otherwise it's still too easy to dismiss. So let's look at some of the mechanics together. So besides energy rising through the pyramid and being emitted out of the top. It's also emitting energy from each of the base angles to a lesser degree, because through the argument of geometry, the idea is that the greater the slope angle, the greater the energy is going to move upwards. And this is demonstrated with the Giza pyramids through thermal imaging, as well as radio imaging, to demonstrate that when you direct radio waves at the Great Pyramids of Giza, they get funneled through the shaft system and they emerge out of the top and increase in their frequency as they do so, which is very strange. So let me just quickly read a passage from my book. And this same principle holds true in smaller home-built pyramids. Thermal imaging has detected consistent hotspots at the vertices and apexes of pyramid structures. So that is implying at the angles. Interestingly, this occurs even in skeletal frames constructed from conductive materials like copper. These temperature anomalies suggest a localized concentration of energy. What's notable is that this phenomenon appears largely independent of the pyramid's mass or the specific material used. What is it? That's very strange. In other words, it's the geometry, not just the substance, that may be influencing energy distribution. This explains, in part, what has been demonstrated, as we discussed before, with the Golod, Kukulkan, and Bosnian pyramids alike. It has also been validated with Carillion photography, reaffirming this torsion field hypothesis. So for the alternative physics approach, it seems like that is the greatest way we can look at it. Interestingly, radiesthesia practitioners and dowsers working with pendulums or bobbers report the same spiral influence, often intensifying at the apex or base of a pyramid. These effects shift depending on location, orientation, and structural design, suggesting that both physical and biological systems may be interacting with the field. This spiral emission that we have documented strongly supports the presence of a torsion field or vortex-like behavior. The strangest thing is that they appear to move through the pyramid in a loop from base to apex and back, much like a toroidal flow system. This affirms that the pyramid shape is acting as a passive energy device, one that concentrates and recycles energy through form, not force. This leads us toward scalar wave physics, still speculative in mainstream science, but increasingly explored in fringe and field-based research. Unlike traditional electromagnetic radiation, scalar waves are longitudinal. They push through space rather than radiate outward. So that's explaining what I had said earlier about how we observed with the Golod pyramid and the Bosnian pyramids that there is no outward radiation of the energetic field that's being emitted. And that goes back to that 28 kilohertz signal that was measured in Visoko, Bosnia. And it grew stronger at the altitude as opposed to the base, which that completely defies standard radio behavior. It's also worth emphasizing that this spiral effect isn't limited to instrumentation. Many dowsers, well, this is including myself, I don't have to read it from my book. Many dowsers, including myself, working independently across continents report a clear torque or spin when approaching pyramid apexes or geometric energy nodes. Yeah, I won't keep reading, it's boring at that point. It's not an audiobook after all. Let me tell you it as a story. So I work with a pendulum, and I've been doing this for a few years on my land. Not to a great extent. Only recently have I started employing it to help determine where to put certain perennial plants, mainly trees. And that's been rewarding. I find that I get led on a goose chase around my land and find places that are very important for a certain tree. And I put this year a Giza pyramid in my garden, and in order to find the location, I dowsed for it. So I used the rods, right, and I lead to a certain point. And then I pulled out my pendulum, and I asked a very simple question, wanting to know what direction the vortex of energy from that land was moving, whether it was upward or downward. And when it started spinning, it showed me right away that there was something strange about that spot. When I put the pyramid there and then dowsed with my pendulum at the tip of the pyramid, it spun so fast that it broke the chain that was attached to the pendulum. Luckily, I retrieved the pendulum. I went back to my workshop, and it was cheap, mass-produced kind of junk. It looked nice. The pendulum was shiny. It looked like it was made of gold. It was crappy. So I go back into my workshop and I pull out just the generic chain, and I put a new chain on it that's really thick and robust. And then I go back out, do the same thing, and it starts spinning, and it's moving so fast that it's playing. It shot the pendulum, came right off the chain because the pendulum part broke too. Such cheap Chinese garbage. Oh dear. And it shot off, and I have no idea where it went. To this day, I have not found it. And now I've gone to doing a farmer's pendulum. I made it out of a large nut. Just attached a chain to it. It's like a weapon. So you don't want to be close to me when I'm holding a pendulum, especially my new one, over the tip of my pyramid, or you'll get a black eye. Now, I still think there are some of you that will hear that, and I see the metrics. I've seen in the Facebook community that we manage, we're almost 300,000 members now, and still when people talk about dowsing, it stirs a lot of resistance, and it doesn't get a lot of exposure. You might be one of those people who are listening to this thinking, well, this is nonsense. But it's not. Even I have had look, I'm convinced internally that there's truth to these things that I've been doing. And I've had confirmation in ways like this that are so significant that there is no possible way that I could have spun that pendulum so fast. It was moving so fast that it literally alarmed me. I started laughing hysterically like a madman. And good thing everyone else was sleeping. I better go to a commercial. It's been 2 years now, 2 long years. The Electroculture Beginners to Advanced community about to reach a milestone. We're going to hit 300,000 members before the summer of 2025 is finished. But it's a lot of hard work, oh my goodness. I have over 100 pieces of written content on our Substack. If you haven't seen that, take a look. A lot of effort, a lot of love, all available for free. And the Foundation series, this podcast itself, presently 2 to 3 days of work every single week. I am starting to burn myself thin. But I'm in this for the long haul. I'm rooted in passion. I want to see electroculture spread the world over. What this movement can do is incredible, and what it means most importantly for people like you is an opportunity to not just grow high quality nutrient dense food with less, but to do so in a way that radically transforms not just the way you grow food, but the way you see yourself and the very cosmos that you're a part of. I think within this movement lies a hidden gem, a newfound paradigm of life. And if you're in this like me, slowly it's going to be revealed. I promise you. But in order to make this happen, in order to keep going on this project as it is, I need to ask a favor. Although we've reached our first $1,000 worth of committed members to the Foundation Insider Editions, it's not enough for me to keep going. Yet, here I am. I need to 10x this project, and here's what I'm asking of you. If you want to commit less than $5 a month, that's it. You get access to the extensions, or a year subscription will give you all the extensions in the year ahead. It's that validation that's going to keep me motivated beyond, well, God. All right, well, thanks for staying with me so far. At this point, you're likely starting to wonder, well, this is all good and well, but why does this pyramid technology matter for me in the realm of electroculture? Ultimately, I think that's why many of you are here. You want to be able to apply this technology in a practical way, not just for meditation, which has merit. If you sit under a pyramid, you can indeed induce alpha brainwave states much more readily. And there are certain pyramid shapes. I wouldn't recommend the Giza pyramid for that purpose. There's subtle energy dynamics that can make it harmful if used inappropriately, and it's, dare I say, dangerous. That's where the Golod dimensions make more sense. But if you want to use pyramids for the purpose of stimulating plant growth, seed epigenetics, increasing germination speeds, and improving yield, vigor, and resistance to disease, it's all possible with pyramid technology. You just need to get the foundations correct. When you do that, you're looking at orientation, you're looking at timing, the right moment in which to leave seeds, appropriate duration, the angles of the pyramid itself, what pyramid structure you want to use for different purposes. And it's pretty nuanced, to be honest, and it's difficult to convey fully in this medium. I will cover that momentarily, however, but I think it's still valuable for many listeners to understand what makes a pyramid work. So how does a pyramid really work? This is where things get really interesting. We're stepping beyond architecture here, beyond the symbolism of the design, even beyond the geometry. The deeper you look at pyramid structures, both ancient and modern, the clearer it becomes. These shapes might have been designed to tap into natural forces, forces we still don't fully understand. I keep repeating that because even I don't grasp it. I see the pragmatic results, and for many that's enough. But for people who are, well, I think there are not a lot of nuts and bolts electroculture researchers and tinkerers. You may be one of those. So these forces, they seem to cover both the familiar and the mysterious. We're talking electrostatics, magnetism, electromagnetic radiation. These are all conventional. But there are also forces that many researchers associate with more subtle energetic phenomena. bioenergetic fields. Let me be upfront right away. There's a ton of research out there. Some of it is solid, some of it, well, not so much. The data isn't always consistent, and a lot of these findings wouldn't pass through the usual peer-reviewed filters. But many of these researchers have spent decades on this work, and I think their findings deserve a closer investigation. So what forces are actually at play here? That's the big question, and honestly, no one really agrees. There are two main camps of thought, two ways of looking at this. Neither explain everything, but both give us a part of the puzzle, which is why I think I need to share these concepts. I want to say that in our community, we have people who look at electroculture through a pragmatic, conventional lens, and then there are those who are looking at it through an energetic, subtle lens. Both camps, in my view, need to integrate together. And, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to take a middle path, because if you are more on the energetic, subtle realms, you're a bit grossed out by the science, typically. And if you're more scientific, pragmatic, materialistic, you just denounce any of the woo entirely. And I think that's unfair. The first camp, the conventional electromagnetic theories, this is looking at what we can measure, known physical forces like electrostatic and magnetic fields. This is well documented by many researchers. I like to speak on the work of the late John Burke and Kaj Halberg, both of which ran many tests with ancient pyramid structures, predominantly in Mesoamerica, looking at the pyramids, the most ancient pyramids of the Olmecs, and then the later pyramids of the Mayans and the Aztecs. The Olmec pyramids were more significant, which is interesting. It's almost like the technology itself began to degrade over time, or a loss of meaning. Material sciences, location, alignment with the Earth's magnetic field. Also, the Earth's magnetic field changed slightly in that pyramid, so there was a change in the efficacy as well. John Burke and Kaj Halberg, they used voltmeters and magnetometers to measure the subtle field dynamics, the gross influence that could be seen through magnetic fields and electrostatic fields. They observed, especially around the apex of step pyramids, right on the top, particularly during equinoxes, as we looked at this energetic light phenomena that could be seen through a few photographs, but they were able to document that in gross phenomena, meaning that they saw increase in electrostatic energy, increased in voltage differential, which links back to Siemens' observation at the introduction, where we saw his crude Leyden jar and his ability to actually funnel that electrostatic differential into a jar, which is amazing, and induce an electrostatic shock, which for the Arabs who were with him was heresy and the work of the jinn. But this is electrostatic phenomena. They also observed changes in local magnetic field strength with their magnetometers. And what they saw was that seeds placed on top of these pyramids, particularly during an equinox, when due to geometric alignment of the sun in association with the Earth's magnetic field, increased this significantly. And as a result, the seeds that were charged on top of these pyramids, ungerminated, left whole, when they brought those seeds, even after a couple days, to a laboratory or a field study they were able to show that the seeds germinated quicker, in greater volume. So older seeds that had a reduction in total seed germination rates, they found that this form of seed charging increased not just the speed at which the seeds germinated, but the overall volume of seeds, which is amazing. They also observed greater yields, upwards of 20%, sometimes even 30% greater yields in corn, which is interesting because the ancient Mayans, they would worship a god associated with corn. This is when they would undergo fertility rituals with seeds, corn seeds, and they had direct experiential results that mirrored these ancient fertility rites, which is very, very fascinating. So they're looking at the gross phenomena here, these electromagnetic theories. And this still has to do with the subtle, which Burke and Hallberg, they don't speak about subtle energetic phenomena like vortexes. They throw out the word vortex a few times in their book. I don't think they have a choice because of the correlation to specific areas in the world, such as Sedona in Arizona, where there are many mesas that are very ferromagnetic. They've got the red rock, essentially. And in these areas, many people refer to these places as having power points or energy vortexes. It's very new age, but from the perspective of integrating the work of Hallberg and Burke, we're able to connect that with torsion field dynamics and knowledge of space to open up an entirely different perspective on these phenomena. But that's a bit of a digression. Let's move into the second camp, the subtle energy and geometric resonance theories that exist. So in my view, this group tends to think more broadly. They look beyond the physics that we presently understand. They look into, oh dear, I'm sitting on a ball in my recording studio and I lost my balance. All right, I'm not going to edit that out at this point. There's the second camp, right? So they're looking at scalar waves. They're looking at torsion fields, etheric energy, concepts that don't fit neatly into standardized science. I like the work of researchers like Dan Davidson, for example. He believed that pyramid shapes interact with etheric fields. He has a book titled Shape Power, and I think that gives a really good perspective. It's a bit too deep presently, but it's a starting point to understand that geometric shapes are influencing gross material matter in subtle ways. And he proposed this idea that he called the vertex effect, in which the apex of the pyramids and even the sides, based on the slope angles, are channeling energy, and depending upon the geometry is going to influence the torsion field or an energetic vortex that is formed around the structure. For better or for worse, this is why getting the geometry right is important, because not all field dynamics from this subtle view are beneficial to all life forms. So if you get the harmonics wrong and you orient the pyramid incorrectly, you have a detrimental effect on life. This goes into also the work of Ibrahim Karim and his biogeometry approach, which is really fascinating, very in-depth, beyond what I think we should cover here. Maybe I'll have someone come on the podcast in future and give it some justice. But he spoke of a concept called BG3 energies, a unique blend of magnetic and electric frequencies that don't seem to fit within conventional electromagnetics. He drew from the work of the radiesthesis practitioners of France, who spoke of different color spectrums outside of our conventional color spectrum. If I'm incorrect, I apologize. I believe they spoke on about 12 different colors, and they used circular angles to measure with pendulums and specific bobbers these frequencies. And this goes into principles of negative green and starts to theorize why the southern portion of the Giza pyramid structure has a desiccating effect, which you don't want if you're going to be sitting in a pyramid for long periods of time. So this is quite complicated stuff, but the ancient Egyptians, they obviously understood these subtle energies to some extent, and I do believe they likely used their pyramids for the purpose of storing grain. That would have been very important to have portions of the pyramids that maintained a consistent temperature of about 20 degrees Celsius in a desert climate. And also, given what I've seen with what are Mickey Mouse toys compared to the Great Pyramids of Giza, what I've seen with seed epigenetics demonstrates to me that the Great Pyramids must have been used for seed storage and other seed charging principles. And this is only explainable through these subtle energy concepts. So most folks in this camp, they will admit that we don't have the physics for this, but the effects themselves, they speak loudly. And this for me is why doing your own experimentation, instead of trying to debunk or discredit this particular camp, is essential, because you can see results that don't fit nicely into the first camp. There were other researchers like Arsene Boys and Jorge Rodriguez. They both mapped these subtle fields using human sensitivity. Magnetoreceptivity is what I like to use, and I think that makes it more accessible for conventional researchers. These are looking at the human as a antenna and using certain tools and instruments and techniques to begin mapping and measuring the subtle harmonics of shapes like pyramids, and how the appropriate geometry can amplify existing exchanges of energy between stellar bodies and our Earth. And there are certain power points, certain locations, due to geological substances below the grade of that location, as well as atmospheric phenomena that, when they interact together, amplify the effects of pyramid technology. So there are many subtle layers to this technology. What we can see when we start to combine both of these camps together, I think, is a revelation that is greater than the individual parts. One theory suggests that pyramids, when aligned with the Earth's magnetic field, begin to act as energy concentrators. Another perspective is that pyramids work like antennas, pulling cosmic energy from our sun, perhaps even planetary bodies or other cosmic energy from stellar phenomena outside of our solar system. The people in this camp, they throw the term cosmic energy around like it covers everything, but it's not. It's still just pointing at something, because cosmic radiation is complicated stuff. I like the hybrid idea that pyramids channel a current from above and below and begin to loop it together in a vortexing effect. This is observable with subtle techniques, dowsing, radiesthesia. It's also observed the impact of these energies are observed through devices like the BioWell, which is a build upon the Carillion photography, and it's measuring the energetic effects of shape, power, and how it influences living things. You can measure the energetic resonance effect that occurs with living things exposed to pyramid power. So I don't know where this leaves us, honestly. The more I know, the more I realize the less I know and the more humble I become, honestly. We can look at it as electromagnetic waveguides that amplify Hertzian electromagnetics and just look at it through a conventional perspective. And that does merit, but it doesn't explain everything. So I think we need to integrate these theories together. Presently, with the first draft of my book, I haven't been able to make some super theory that integrates all these together in a holistic way. It's still very quirky, but I think it's fun, and it points to a greater perspective that no single theory can provide. So together, what this does is it offers a fascinating window into how pyramid technology might work. And I'm hopeful that together as a community, we can begin to start deciphering the subtleties of it all, and working from the subtle to the gross, begin to see a greater perspective that hopefully can bring utility. Because ultimately, if we can't integrate pragmatism into this, well, then it's useless mind candy, to be honest. And I'm not interested in that. I do like looking at the full picture, as you've probably noticed, but my hope is providing practical examples as to how you can integrate this technology in real world use cases. This is my hope. So in the next installment, we break down pyramid geometry. You'll learn the proportions, angles, and alignments that matter most, how to position a pyramid, which direction to face it, and why these choices change the results. We'll cover real-world effects, faster beer fermentation, quicker seed germination, stronger, healthier plants, even how charged stones can broadcast energy across a homestead. It all sounds strange, but it's happening, and we'll show you how. I've heard from people who swear their pyramid resets their nervous system in 15 minutes. It got me thinking about building a Golod pyramid myself, and while I already use Giza, I've avoided meditating inside them for one reason: negative green. We'll cover that in the extension. We'll also look at how different pyramid designs create different effects and what to watch out for if you're using one on yourself. Because this isn't just fringe theory anymore. If these effects hold true, pyramid energy could be one of the most overlooked tools we have for gardeners, healers, and anyone thinking about the future of resilience. Now, I'll admit this hasn't been an easy journey for me, given my story with the pendulum shooting like a rocket, but it opened my mind, and I hope at some point this journey does the same for you. To get access to that and unlock the full Electroculture Foundation series, check out the link in the show notes or description. It's less than $5 a month with full-length episodes every Friday. Become an early pioneer of a growing movement and help support your favorite show. That's a wrap on this free edition of the Electroculture Foundation series. If you're a Foundation insider, stick around. There's more coming up after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.